Hi everyone. My name is Paris Goodyear Brown. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor, and I am the clinical director of Nurture House, which is a local child and family treatment center here in Franklin, Tennessee, and the executive director of the Trauma Play Institute, which is a training arm that trains clinicians all around the world in how to work with traumatized children and their families. And I've been asked today to talk with you about what I believe to be the #1 public health threat facing the United States today, which is childhood trauma. You may have heard already about the Adverse Childhood Experiences studies. They were conducted by Dr. Vince Felitti with Kaiser Permanente and Dr. Bob Onda with the Centers for Disease Control. They took a sample of about 17,000 adults and asked them a series of questions about their childhood experiences. What we have found is that there are a group of at least 10 adverse childhood experiences. The things that you might expect to be on the list, like physical abuse and sexual abuse and emotional abuse. There's also physical and emotional neglect. And then there's a whole series of household dysfunctions that include parental substance use and incarceration of a parent, mental illness of a parent, domestic violence, those sorts of things. So when we think about adverse childhood experiences and what it is that those sort of household dysfunctions have in common, it has to do with the caregiving being compromised in some way, right? What we'd expect to be attuned caregiving. So from the moment that a baby is first put in mommy's arms and goes, "Agaga," and the mommy goes, "Agugu," from that very first moment, that's when the little one learns that they have a voice and that they matter. And ultimately, as the child is hungry and the parent feeds the child, and the child is wet and the parent changes the child, and the child wants to be held and the parent holds the child, after thousands and thousands of repetitions of need meeting in these ways, that little one develops a belief that they matter, that the world is a pretty safe place, and that they're going to get their needs met regularly. When any of these adverse childhood experiences happen, they pile on in ways that when people have several of these, if you have a parent who has gone to jail and has also dealt with a substance use problem and also has a mental illness, when there are 4 or more of these ACEs in a child's life, they are exponentially more likely to have physical health issues and mental health issues, things like lung cancer and diabetes and heart disease, and mental health issues like depression and suicidality are all amplified when a child has had multiple adverse childhood experiences. And so why is that? Why does that occur? When a child does not have that attuned caregiving, meeting their needs, helping to build their brain in healthy ways, there are a lot of things that happen in terms of children's ability to learn and to grow and to feel safe. The ability to be seen precedes the ability to feel safe. And when we talk about brain development, I'll take just a minute to help you kind of unpack that a little bit. So this is Dan Siegel's hand-brain model, which some of you will have been introduced to before, but it's the most simplified way of understanding what it is that's being built into children's brains from the very beginning of life. So the brain stem here, if we think about the heel of the hand, this is where regulation functions occur. So all of our autonomic nervous system sorts of functions like breathing and heart rate and body temperature, all of those things are controlled usually outside of our consciousness, right? Over that, the limbic brain grows, and it's sort of the seat of our emotions and also our ability to negotiate and compromise and connect with other people. All that good attachment stuff kind of lives in here. If we put our thumb right here in the middle of our hand, that is the amygdala. And these are almond-shaped clusters of cells in the midbrain that are sort of the seat of somatosensory memories as they relate to heightened emotional experiences. So that's a lot of words, but really what it means is if you have had a joyful experience, maybe the day you got married or the day your baby was put in your arms for the first time, you may have some crystal clear sense memories of those events. So the taste of the wedding cake or the smell of your new baby's head. If that is true of our joyful memories, it is doubly true of the things that terrify us. We were not meant to have to hold a lot of the adversities that we hold as little ones. So over that grows the neocortex then, and that is our thinking brain. And the questions that very simply attach to each of these parts of the triune brain, this brain stem is always asking, and it's true for us as adults too, is always asking, am I safe? The limbic brain is always asking, am I loved? And the thinking brain is asking, what can I learn from this? But unless those lower brain region questions, am I safe and am I loved, are answered with resounding yeses, then the thinking brain can't do its job. And so what does this mean for us? We have developed, at least within our trauma play model that we teach and train on, we have developed a set of caregiver roles that we believe to really move right alongside the needs of children who come from hard places. So if this brainstem is asking, am I safe? We as the caregivers are moving into the role of safe boss. If this limbic brain, this midbrain here, is asking, am I loved? We move into the role of nurturer. And then once those questions, am I safe and am I loved, are answered with yes and yes, then as the child is asking, what can I learn from this, and particularly with foster and adoptive children and teens, there may be incoherence in their narratives, their stories of who they are and where they come from and are they good. Children often come into a new family or into treatment with a sense of their own badness. And part of really what we're trying to get a shift to happen in is their sense of their goodness, right? Their preciousness. And so the story keeping function is what the safe bosses, the grown-ups, move into for these little ones. So it's a very simple rubric for you as a caregiver to be thinking about is, how do I be safe boss? How do I be nurturer? And how do I be story keeper for the child in my care? So part of the story keeping function we think is really important when it comes to adverse childhood experiences, and why it's so important to understand where kids come from and how it's affected their brain development and how it's affected their stress response system, is that then we, as the caregivers now, can look at this big behavior we're seeing right now and sort of thread the needle back through to their earliest experiences and see the preciousness in the midst of them. So what does this mean for us in terms of day-to-day functioning? So I like to think of what we're doing with kids who have had massive amounts of cortisol released in their bloodstreams is a neurochemical boxing match. And that we're constantly doing this dance to manage and help regulate these lower brain region needs for the children and teens in our care. So if you think about early trauma, that massive cortisol stress hormone gets released in the bloodstream and can actually compromise our ability to ground ourselves, to be seen, to be in social connection with one another. If cortisol is the stress hormone, and there's a hilarious picture of my little one who I had put him in this Hershey Kiss costume, and he had sort of lost his mind, literally lost his thinking brain, like, what is this shiny thing I'm in? Cortisol being released into his bloodstream, right? If cortisol is the stress hormone, then this is the bonding chemical, oxytocin. So every time that we laugh with a little one in our care, every time that we give a hug or a snuggle or a high five, and every time that we play with the little one in our care, we are bringing oxytocin on board. And it may be an oversimplification. Okay, it's definitely an oversimplification, but I see this oxytocin, this playfulness and joy and delight as sort of an antidote for the cortisol that's been released into the bloodstream. And so we really are, if we think about in the brains of our little ones that their excitation, how excited they get, excitation, aggression, and anxiety, they all balance on the head of a pin neurophysiologically. And so we're always looking for how do we keep kids and teens within their window of tolerance for excitation or distress. And we do that in these new exciting ways that are using the whole of ourselves to regulate that child. So in our stress response system, when you think about the adverse childhood experiences of whoever it is that you're caring for now, the earliest stress response we developed as humans was an immobilization response. So if there was something big and scary that was just about to eat us, and certainly for other little creatures to eat them, they would just freeze. They would pretend, we call it death feigning, collapse. They would pretend to be dead. And the big creature would just move away and, decide not to eat them. And so it was a very adaptive coping response. When we were neurocepting life threat, and there are no choices, you can't choose, just to play dead. And so that immobilization freeze response is one that we still see all the time with our traumatized children. Over that, a more recent adaptation in our stress response system is the mobilization response. So when we see the big scary creature coming and we can choose a way to go, we can either fight or run away. Well, then we fight or flee, right? That makes sense. What we now know, though, we used to think it was just that. We would either stop, freeze, or we would have the gas, the pedal to the metal, running away or fighting. What we now know is that there's actually parts of the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve, kind of attached to the base of our brain. They run all the way into our gut to immobilize and freeze us, but they're also attached here at the base of our brain with tendrils that move into our jaw and into our throat and into our face. So everything about the way that we use ourselves, our soft tone of gaze, our loving tone of voice, the proxemics, sometimes when I'm with a very frightened child, if I can just sort of sidle up sideways and rub their back gently, that's going to bring a neuroception of safety. What we're after is trying to neurocept safety with children and teens as often as we can. So the more you can become safe boss, nurturer, and story keeper for the children in your care, the better off we're going to be. I think the better off we're going to be in the world together. So one last thought for you before we say goodbye for today. As you're thinking through the rhythms of your day and how you practically do this with the child or teen in your care, there are a couple of roles that I would love for you to just keep in mind. So we talk about these two roles. We ask you to sort of put your hands up like this and then to say, I am a secure base and I am a safe haven. So secure base and safe haven are the two roles that parents are constantly moving in and out of in the course of a day. And secure base, the way I think about that is as a little, like a 3-year-old and his mom on the playground. And the 3-year-old has wrestled up the first couple of rungs of the ladder to get to the monkey bars. And the parent is right there behind. And they're now as far off the ground as, they are tall. They're a little bit scared. Their stress response system is kicking in. They say, oh gosh, is it okay, Mom? And Mom says, I think you got this, buddy. I'm right here to help you if you need it, but I think you can do it. And the little one wrestles up one more rung of the ladder and has this huge competency surge, goodness in his body. I did it, which actually means we did it together. Mommy and me, we did it together. That's the secure base role. We are wanting to support the exploration, support the independence of the child in our care. But then, and I think this is true not just of children, but of myself and all of us in the world, that when we get scared or cold or hungry or tired or any of those things, we need to come back to what was our secure base. And we as the parent then, instead of supporting exploration, we're welcoming that child back into stress. And so that is pretty easy to do. If you have a little one who has scraped their knee and they're bleeding and they come running to you with tears and say, I need a Band-Aid, most of us can lean into that and say, oh, buddy, let me help you. It's a lot harder when you have a teenager who's got their hand on their hip and they're saying, you're not my mom. You don't get to tell me what to do. You're not the boss of me. That's a lot harder to hear that underlying distress. But that angry teen is just as much in distress as the child who scraped their knee. So moving in and out of these two roles, secure base and safe haven, are the very simple ways that you, as you use yourself to connect and to heal these children that you care for, the teenagers, and even your life partner and your friends and colleagues. And these two roles, secure base and safe haven, as we move in and out of them, they help to heal these adverse childhood experiences. So the most important thing in the healing of the kiddos in your care is you.